On the morning of April 5th, 1933, a Manhattan attorney walked into Chase National Bank and asked for his gold back. He had deposited it there himself. It was his. He had the receipts. Chase refused. The government indicted him. His gold was never returned. You will hear the full story in a moment. But hold that image. A man who thought his property was safe inside the most trusted institution he knew, discovering in a single morning that it was not. Now, 90 years later, a new asset exists that its advocates say the government cannot do that to, cannot confiscate, cannot freeze, cannot touch. They call it Bitcoin. This channel does not trade in promises. It trades in the forensic record. So today we're going to apply the same test to both assets. The test that 4 monetary collapses have taught us to ask. Not which one is better, not which one will make you richer, which one actually protects you when the system turns against you. Before we go further, nothing in this video is financial advice. This channel examines the historical record. What you do with that record is your decision. Do your own research. Consult a qualified advisor before making any investment. We are historians here, not brokers. The test from 4 monetary collapses. The Roman debasement, Spain's silver flood, the 1970s dollar crisis, and the American gold confiscation of 1933. We can extract 5 criteria that every serious store of value must pass, not theoretical tests, historical ones. Test 1. Does it survive government confiscation? Test 2. Does it survive the collapse of the institutions that support it? Test 3. Does it maintain purchasing power across decades, not months, decades? Test 4. Does it function without trust in a counterparty? Test 5. Can it be held privately outside the financial system entirely? We're going to run both assets through all 5 tests today. And I'm going to give you the evidence, not cheerleading, the evidence. Test 1. Confiscation. On April 5th, 1933, Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. You already know this story if you watched the gold confiscation video, but let me give you the part most people skip. A Manhattan attorney named Frederick Barber Campbell had deposited 27 bars of gold bullion at Chase National Bank. When the executive order hit, he went back to Chase and asked for his gold. They refused. He sued. The government indicted him the next day after an 18-minute grand jury session. 18 minutes to indict a Harvard Law graduate for the crime of wanting his own property back. The lead prosecutor was a young assistant U.S. attorney named Thomas Dewey, who would later run for president twice. Campbell's gold was never returned. That is what confiscation looks like when the government targets gold held inside the financial system. Now the critical question the audience at home is already asking. What about the gold that was not in the bank? Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz estimated in A Monetary History of the United States, which is not a gold dealer's brochure, is the most rigorous monetary history ever written, that only about 1 in 4 Americans who owned gold actually surrendered it. 1 in 4. The other 3 did nothing. No door-to-door searches followed, no home raids. The government got the gold it could see. The gold it could not see stayed exactly where it was. That is the first forensic lesson of 1933. Not that gold can be confiscated, that it can only be confiscated when it's visible to the system. Now let's run Bitcoin through the same test. The United States government has seized enormous quantities of Bitcoin. The Silk Road, the Bitfinex hacked James Jong, who had a fortune in a popcorn tin under a bathroom floor in Georgia. In every single case, they got the coins not by breaking the encryption, but because someone left the keys on a cloud drive, had an open laptop, or because the money trail led directly to an exchange where identity was already on file. The encryption has not been broken. The humans holding the keys made mistakes, but there is a crucial difference between gold and Bitcoin on this test, and it matters enormously. When the U.S. government wanted to find Frederick Campbell's gold, it needed to raid Chase National Bank, a physical location, a known institution. When a government wants to restrict Bitcoin, it does not need to find anything. It can simply cut off the exchanges, the payment processes, the places where Bitcoin meets the ordinary economy. It cannot seize your Bitcoin if you hold the private keys yourself. That is technically true, but it can make your Bitcoin difficult or impossible to convert into anything you can spend. There is a phrase in the Bitcoin community that captures this exactly. Not your keys, not your coins. Self-custody Bitcoin held on a hardware wallet with private keys known only to you and has never been cryptographically seized. Gold held in a bank, visible, confiscatable. Gold buried in a backyard, invisible, left alone. Bitcoin on an exchange, visible, confiscatable. Bitcoin in self-custody with a memorized key, invisible, left alone. The mechanism is identical. The instrument is different. Both assets pass test 1 with the same condition attached. The asset the government can see is the asset the government can reach. Both or neither, depending entirely on what you do with them. Test 2. Institutional collapse. Constantine established the Roman solidus in the early 4th century. The Western Roman Empire collapsed 150 years later. The solidus kept circulating for nearly 1,000 years after that. Arab traders called it the dinar. The Venetians copied it as the ducat. The coin changed names. The gold inside it did not. Physical gold requires no institution to function, no government, no exchange, no internet, no electricity. It is the one asset that has never in recorded history gone to zero. Not once, not anywhere. Bitcoin was born from institutional collapse. Satoshi Nakamoto released the Bitcoin white paper in the autumn of 2008, 6 weeks after Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. The Genesis block, the first block ever mined, was embedded with a newspaper headline, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Bitcoin was designed as an answer to exactly the kind of institutional failure this channel documents. But here is the question the forensic record forces us to ask. Has it actually survived institutional collapse, or has it merely survived so far? The honest answer requires looking at what actually happened to the institutions built around it. In February of 2014, Mt. Gox, which at its peak processed the majority of all global Bitcoin transactions, halted withdrawals, filed for bankruptcy. The Bitcoin of over 100,000 creditors was gone. A London developer named Colin Burgess had his savings locked inside. He flew to Tokyo, stood in the snow outside the exchange's Shibuya office, and held up a cardboard sign that read, "MTG, where is our money?" He protested for a week until Japanese police shut it down. Mark Karpless, the man who ran Mt. Gox, was convicted and received a suspended sentence, meaning he served no prison time. In November of 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried's exchange FTX collapsed. A letter sent to the Department of Justice from one of the victims described depositing a lifetime of savings into FTX 3 months before the collapse. "My whole life has been destroyed. I have 2 young children. My wife is suicidal and depressed." Bankman-Fried was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. Here is what the forensic record actually shows. The Bitcoin protocol has never been hacked. Not once. The mathematics underlying it remain intact. Every catastrophic failure in Bitcoin's history has been a failure of the human institutions built around it, not the asset itself. Mt. Gox was a badly run exchange. FTX was, according to John J. Ray III, the man who handled the Enron bankruptcy, a complete failure of corporate controls run by people who had no idea what they were doing with other people's money. The same distinction that runs through every script this channel has produced applies here. Bitcoin on an exchange, paper gold, subject to the fraud and failure of the institution holding it. Bitcoin in self-custody, buried gold, dependent only on you. Gold passes test 2 unconditionally. The asset itself has no institution to collapse. It simply exists. Bitcoin passes test 2 conditionally if and only if you hold your own keys. The moment you trust an institution with them, you own paper Bitcoin. And paper Bitcoin, as Mt. Gox and FTX proved, is worth whatever the institution decides it is worth on the day it fails, both with very different conditions attached. Test 3. Purchasing power across decades. In 1930, 1 ounce of gold bought a high-quality men's suit. In 2026, 1 ounce of gold still buys a high-quality men's suit. That is not a gold dealer's marketing line. Economist Roy Jastrom tracked gold's purchasing power across 200 years of primary market data. The ratio is not perfectly constant, but the pound and the dollar have each lost the vast majority of their purchasing power since the gold standard ended. Gold is not. But here is what the gold advocates do not always tell you. In 1980, fear was at a peak and everyone was buying gold. Then the price collapsed and kept falling for nearly 20 years. A middle-aged person who bought at that peak to protect their retirement and needed that money at retirement was devastated. Gold did not recover its real purchasing power from that moment until 45 years later. Gold is a generational store of value. It is not always a 20-year one. Now, Bitcoin launched in 2009 at a price so small it is difficult to express meaningfully. In the years that followed, it appreciated more than any asset in recorded financial history. And it has also crashed more violently than almost any asset in recorded financial history. For separate times, Bitcoin lost more than 3/4 of its value. Not in a slow decline, in a rout. After the first great crash, it was written off. Finished dead. Then it came back higher. After the second crash, it was written off again. Then it came back higher. After the third, the same. After the fourth, the same. Every single crash was followed by a new all-time high. That is Bitcoin's most honest historical argument. Not stability, not predictability, asymmetric recovery. But here is the purchasing power question that 16 years of data cannot answer. When Nixon closed the gold window, gold ran for 9 straight years. That looked like permanent appreciation to everyone who was buying near the top. Then came 2 decades of decline, then recovery, then a new all-time high. The pattern only made sense in retrospect. Is Bitcoin following the same arc, a new monetary asset finding its price in real time with violent cycles along the way? No one knows, including me, including the people who are most certain. Gold passes test 3 over centuries, but can punish you across decades if you buy at a peak driven by fear. Bitcoin passes test 3 over its own short history, with a caveat that 16 years is not history. It is a data point. Test 4. Counterparty risk. This is where the distinction between the asset and the institution holding it becomes the entire argument. Physical gold held in your own possession has no counterparty. None. There is no company that can go bankrupt and take it with them. No bank that can freeze it. No government that can reverse a transaction digitally. No intermediary of any kind. That is not a feature of gold. That is the definition of physical gold. But paper gold, gold ETFs, gold certificates, gold held at a bank or allocated account has exactly as much counterparty risk as any other financial product because it is a financial product. A claim on gold, not gold. The lesson of 1933 is not that gold was confiscated. The lesson is that the paper claims on gold were confiscated and the physical gold that had no paper trail was not. Frederick Campbell had a receipt. The government found it. The Americans who said nothing hid their coins and kept no records. The government found nothing. Now, the Bitcoin protocol itself has no counterparty. No company controls it. No government issued it. The total supply is capped at 21 million coins written into the code. That number cannot be changed without the coordinated agreement of the majority of the entire global network, which has resisted every attempt to do so. The protocol has been running without interruption for 16 years without a single successful breach. But Bitcoin held on an exchange has exactly as much counterparty risk as paper gold because it is a claim on Bitcoin, not Bitcoin. Mt. Gox was a claim on Bitcoin. FTX was a claim on Bitcoin. Both claims went to zero. There is a second risk that is unique to Bitcoin with no precise gold equivalent. If you hold your own keys, meaning you are your own bank, and you lose the private key, the Bitcoin is gone permanently, irrecoverably, forever. There is no vault manager to call, no recovery service, no central authority who can override the encryption. A significant share of all Bitcoin that has ever existed is believed to be permanently locked behind lost passwords and forgotten keys, sealed behind mathematics no one can break. That no one will ever spend. There is a programmer named Stephen Thomas who was paid in Bitcoin in 2011 for creating an animated explanation of what Bitcoin was. He stored the private keys on an encrypted USB drive. He wrote the password on a piece of paper. He lost the paper. The drive allows only 10 password attempts before permanently encrypting its contents. He has used 8. 2 guesses remain. At Bitcoin's peak, that locked drive contained a fortune large enough to change every aspect of his life. He has not yet tried the remaining 2 guesses. He cannot bring himself to. That is a risk with no historical equivalent in gold. The paper burns. The vault floods. But the gold remains. Both assets pass test for if and only if you hold the asset in direct self-custody. Both fail the moment an institution becomes involved. Gold fails with a custodian. Bitcoin fails with a custodian or a lost key. Test 5. Outside the system. Test 4 was about the people who hold your asset. Test 5 is about the environment that lets you use it. Gold has been recognized as valuable in every human civilization in recorded history. Without exception, there is no documented case of a society that encountered gold and did not understand what it was worth. Gold does not require electricity. It does not require internet. It does not require a counterparty who understands cryptography or owns a compatible device. A merchant in 17th century Seville, a trader in ancient Mesopotamia, held the same thing in their hands and understood its weight without explanation. Bitcoin cannot function without one thing that gold has never needed: permission. Not from a custodian. We covered that. But from the legal and regulatory environment that determines whether Bitcoin can be converted into anything spendable. Whether the banks that connect it to the dollar economy are allowed to operate. Whether the government of the day decides the infrastructure around it stays open or gets quietly closed, gold has been accepted as payment in every civilization in recorded history. No government permission required. No app, no exchange, no bank account. A coin is a coin. Its weight speaks for itself. Bitcoin requires an environment where transacting in it is legal, where the infrastructure to use it remains open, and where someone on the other side can receive it without risk to themselves. That last condition is the one the U.S. government can control without touching a single coin. In 2023, federal regulators launched what the crypto industry called Operation Choke Point 2. Banking regulators sent in formal guidance to banks discouraging them from serving crypto businesses. Signature Bank, one of the primary banks serving the crypto industry, was seized by regulators. Silvergate, the other major crypto-friendly bank, collapsed the same week. Overnight, the on-ramps and off-ramps that connected Bitcoin to the dollar economy were gone. Bitcoin holders still had their coins. They simply had no straightforward way to convert them into anything they could use to pay a mortgage, buy groceries, or meet a margin call. The coins were not seized. The keys were not taken. The encryption was not broken. The plumbing was removed. That is Bitcoin's real vulnerability for an American holding serious wealth. Not a power outage, not a foreign government. The same government that signed Executive Order 6102 in 1933 can today make Bitcoin functionally unusable without confiscating a single coin by simply deciding which banks are allowed to service which industries. And here is the complication that forces intellectual honesty. In 1933, Americans who wanted to move gold across a border faced something very specific. Wait, a meaningful amount of wealth in gold is heavy. It is detectable. Customs agents know what a man carrying serious money in gold looks like because gold is physical and physics does not negotiate. Bitcoin's answer to that problem is real. A person who has memorized 12 words can walk through any airport in the world through any customs inspection, pass any scanner, carrying no physical object whatsoever, and on the other side reconstruct their entire fortune from memory alone. No customs agent has ever seized memorized words. Gold passes Test 5 for storage. It works in any scenario, in any country, with any counterparty. 5,000 years of evidence. But gold fails Test 5 for movement. The moment you try to carry serious wealth across a border, physics works against you. The weight is real. The risk of seizure is real. History confirms both. Bitcoin passes Test 5 for movement. 12 memorized words cross any border in the world undetected. But Bitcoin fails Test 5 when the government removes the infrastructure that makes it spendable. Not by force, but by quietly cutting off the banks that serve it. The coins remain. The utility disappears. Neither asset passes both conditions. Each passes the one the other fails. The question is not which one passes. The question is which failure can you live with? What the central banks are telling you. There is a signal worth more than any individual's opinion. Central banks have been buying gold at the highest rate since the 1950s. 3 consecutive years of record purchases. And then there is Russia. When the West froze Russia's sovereign reserves in February of 2022, the effect was immediate and surgical. Hundreds of billions of dollars in digital holdings, securities, foreign currency, bonds were frozen with a keystroke. The account simply stopped working. The gold Russia held physically in Moscow was untouchable. Every ounce, because no foreign institution controlled it, because no keystroke could reach it. That gold has since appreciated dramatically. The frozen digital reserves remain frozen. Digital assets held in foreign systems can be seized by coordinated government action without warning. Gold in domestic custody cannot. A survey by the World Gold Council found that nearly a third of all central banks intend to increase their gold reserves within the next year. The highest figure since the survey began. Not one central bank in the world has formally adopted Bitcoin as a reserve asset. There is one exception worth naming and examining carefully. In 2021, El Salvador became the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, mandatory acceptance, government-backed wallets, a presidential bet on a new monetary system. For years later, under pressure from the International Monetary Fund as a condition of a loan agreement, El Salvador quietly rescinded it. Bitcoin was demoted from legal tender to voluntary. The experiment lasted one presidential term. The United States holds a strategic Bitcoin reserve, built entirely from coins seized in criminal proceedings. The Federal Reserve does not hold Bitcoin. Central banks hold gold as top-tier capital under international banking rules. Bitcoin has no such classification. The people with the most information, the longest time horizons, and the most to lose are still choosing gold. That is a data point. It is not a verdict. The question history cannot yet answer now. The unresolved question. Frederick Barbara Campbell had his gold in a vault. The government found the paper trail. They took it. Stephen Thomas has his Bitcoin in a vault. He made the password. He lost the password. He cannot get it out. Is the real lesson of both these stories the same lesson? That no store of value is safer than the system or the person entrusted to hold it. Gold has outlasted every empire, every currency, every government that tried to control it. The solidus circulated for centuries after Rome fell. The mathematics of gold required nothing from history to keep working. Bitcoin has survived crashes that would have ended any other asset class and recovered from all of them. The protocol has never been breached, but it has never survived what gold has survived. A world war, an empire's collapse, a government that decided with a single executive order that private ownership of it was a crime. Here is the question I'm going to leave you with. The government of 1933 could take your gold if it was visible. It could not touch what it could not see. The government of 2026 cannot break Bitcoin's encryption, but it can quietly remove the infrastructure that makes Bitcoin spendable, and it has already demonstrated it is willing to do exactly that. Both assets have a version of the same vulnerability. Visibility for gold, permission for Bitcoin. The question every person watching this has to answer for themselves is not which asset is safer in the abstract. It is which threat they believe is more likely in their lifetime. A government that comes for what it can see and weigh, or a government that quietly pressures banks to stop serving an entire industry, leaving the asset intact but impossible to spend. History has produced both. It has not told us which one comes next. That is the question. Thank you for watching.